The ancient stones of Notre Dame Cathedral have witnessed 20 centuries of Christian worship, its spires reaching toward heaven as they have since medieval times. But just 15 minutes away, in the bustling suburb of Belleville, the call to prayer echoes from the Mosque of Paris 5 times daily, while around the corner Hindu families gather at the Temple of Ganesha for evening prayers. The mosque, the temple, and the cathedral, three worlds, three traditions, all within the same arrondissement of modern Paris. This isn't a story about conflict or replacement. It's about one of the most profound but quietly unfolding transformations in Western history. How immigration is reshaping not just the ethnic makeup of Western countries, but their entire spiritual landscape. From the Gothic churches of England to the Bavarian countryside of Germany, from the multicultural neighborhoods of Toronto to the suburbs of Sydney, a demographic and religious revolution is taking place that will define the character of Western civilization for generations to come. The numbers tell a remarkable story. As of 2020, nearly 280 million people worldwide live outside their country of birth. That's more than the entire population of Indonesia. And here's where it gets fascinating. These migrants aren't just bringing their skills and cultures with them, they're bringing their gods. Christians make up 47% of all international migrants globally, followed by Muslims at 29%, Hindus at 5%, Buddhists at 4%, and Jews at 1%. But here's the twist that demographers didn't expect. Migrants are often more religious than the populations of the countries they're moving to. In the United States, 86% of immigrants express a religious affiliation, compared to just 77% of native-born Americans. Immigration isn't secularizing the West, it's resacralizing it. Welcome back to Professor Archive, where we explore the hidden currents shaping our world. I'm your host, and today we're diving deep into one of the most misunderstood phenomena of our time. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? Are you a student, a teacher, maybe someone working in policy, or just someone fascinated by how our world is changing? Drop a comment and let me know, because this story touches every corner of the globe. Let's start with a mystery that has puzzled European demographers for decades. In 1990, Muslims made up just 4.1% of Europe's population. By 2010, that figure had risen to 6%. Today, it stands at nearly 7%, and some projections suggest it could reach 14% by 2050. But here's what makes this story more complex than simple arithmetic. This isn't just about immigration numbers. It's about age, fertility, secularization, and what sociologists call religious resilience. Consider Germany, Europe's economic powerhouse. In 2016, Chancellor Angela Merkel's decision to accept over 1 million asylum seekers, primarily from Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq, sparked continent-wide debates about integration and identity. What many observers missed was the religious dimension of this demographic shift. Approximately 86% of the refugees Germany accepted were Muslim, compared to just 40% of regular migrants to the country. In a single year, Germany's Muslim population grew by nearly 20%. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Unlike their parents' and grandparents' generations, many young Europeans are turning away from Christianity. Church attendance across Western Europe has plummeted to historic lows. In contrast, Muslim communities in Europe maintain significantly higher levels of religious observance. In the United Kingdom, 64% of Muslims identify as highly religious, compared to just 26% of the general population. This creates what demographers call a double demographic effect. As traditional European populations age and have fewer children, younger, more religious immigrant communities are growing both in absolute numbers and as a percentage of the population. It's not just that more Muslims are arriving in Europe, it's that they're having more children and maintaining their religious practices across generations. The United States presents a different but equally fascinating pattern. America has historically been far more religious than Europe, but even here, immigration is reshaping the spiritual landscape in unexpected ways. The share of new legal permanent residents who are Christian declined from 68% in 1992 to 61% in 2012. Meanwhile, the estimated share of green card recipients who belong to religious minorities rose from 19% to 25%. This includes growing shares of Muslims from 5% to 10% and Hindus from 3% to 7%. Drive through Jackson Heights in Queens, New York, and you'll witness this transformation firsthand. Hindu temples stand alongside Catholic churches, Sikh gurdwaras neighbor Jewish synagogues, and Islamic centers share blocks with Buddhist meditation centers. This isn't just multiculturalism, it's the emergence of what scholars call post-Christian pluralism, where Christianity remains influential but no longer dominates the religious conversation. The Hindu story is particularly remarkable. While Hindus make up just 5% of all international migrants globally, their dispersion patterns reveal something extraordinary about religious motivation and migration. The most popular pathway for Hindu migrants isn't to another Hindu-majority country. It's from India to the United States. About 1.8 million Hindus have made this journey, often bringing with them not just professional skills, but ancient traditions that are now taking root in American suburbs. In Fremont, California, the BAPS Sri Swaminarayan Mandir stands as one of the largest Hindu temples in North America, built entirely from Italian Carrara marble and pink sandstone, hand-carved in India by traditional artisans. Its construction required 34,000 pieces of stone, each numbered and assembled like a massive spiritual puzzle. This isn't just a building, it's a testament to how immigrant communities are literally rebuilding the sacred architecture of the West. But perhaps no group illustrates the complexity of this religious remapping better than the Sikhs. Despite being adherents of the world's fifth largest religion, with 25 million followers worldwide, Sikhs remain largely invisible in Western discussions of immigration and religion. Yet their impact has been profound, particularly in Canada, where they represent 2.1% of the population, a higher proportion than even in India itself. The Sikh community in Surrey, British Columbia, now represents one of the largest concentrations of Sikhs outside of Punjab. Their gurdwaras serve not just as places of worship but as community centers providing free meals to anyone, regardless of religion or background. A tradition called langar that has introduced Western communities to radically inclusive concepts of hospitality and service. The Jewish experience offers yet another perspective on how immigration reshapes religious landscapes. While Jews represent just 0.2% of the global population, they account for 1% of all international migrants, making them statistically the most likely religious group to live outside their country of birth. 20% of Jews worldwide live outside their country of origin, compared to just 6% of Christians and 4% of Muslims. This high mobility has created vibrant Jewish communities across the Western world, but it has also meant that Judaism's global character has been shaped by diaspora experiences for millennia. Today's Jewish communities in New York, London, or Toronto blend religious traditions with local influences in ways that would be unrecognizable to their ancestors in Eastern Europe or North Africa. The story becomes even more intriguing when we examine how second- and third-generation immigrants relate to their inherited faiths. Conventional wisdom suggests that immigrants gradually secularize over generations, adapting to the supposedly more secular norms of Western societies. But recent research reveals a more complex reality. Many second-generation Muslim Americans, for instance, are more religiously observant than their parents, not less. Having grown up navigating between American and Islamic identities, they often develop what scholars call reflexive religiosity, a more conscious, deliberate relationship with their faith than previous generations might have had. Similarly, Hindu Americans are creating new forms of religious practice that blend ancient Sanskrit traditions with contemporary American life. This pattern challenges fundamental assumptions about secularization theory. Rather than religious belief naturally declining as societies modernize, immigration is creating new forms of religious vitality and innovation. Mosques in Minneapolis are developing uniquely American forms of Islamic architecture. Hindu temples in London are incorporating British legal and organizational structures while maintaining traditional spiritual practices. The Buddhist experience in the West represents perhaps the most dramatic example of religious transformation through immigration. While Buddhism has long fascinated Western intellectuals, the arrival of Buddhist immigrants from Southeast Asia, Tibet, and elsewhere has created living, breathing Buddhist communities that go far beyond meditation centers and philosophy discussions. In the San Francisco Bay Area, Vietnamese Buddhist temples serve traditional pho and banh mi alongside meditation sessions, while Tibetan refugee communities have established monasteries where ancient chanting practices echo through California's Silicon Valley. These aren't just transplanted traditions. They're evolved forms of Buddhism adapted to Western contexts while maintaining their essential spiritual core. If you're finding this exploration of our changing world valuable, consider supporting the channel with a super thanks. It helps us continue bringing you these deep dives into the forces reshaping our planet. The implications of this religious remapping extend far beyond statistics or demographics. They touch on fundamental questions about what it means to be Western, European, or American in the 21st century. Traditional notions of Christian civilization are giving way to more complex realities of religious pluralism, but this isn't necessarily leading to the secular societies that many 20th century theorists predicted. Instead, we're witnessing the emergence of what we might call post-Christian religious societies, places where Christianity's cultural influence remains strong, but where Islamic, Hindu, Buddhist, and other traditions are becoming genuinely indigenous rather than foreign imports. This is creating unprecedented theological and philosophical dialogues. In Toronto's Scarborough district, the intersection of Islam and Canadian multiculturalism has produced uniquely Canadian forms of Islamic practice. Mosque architecture incorporates elements that reflect both Islamic traditions and Canadian building codes, creating structures that are recognizably both Islamic and Canadian. Friday prayers are followed by discussions of Canadian politics, Islamic ethics, and how to maintain religious identity while fully participating in secular democratic society. Similar dynamics are playing out across the Western world. In Australia, Buddhist meditation techniques are being incorporated into secular mental health practices, while maintaining their spiritual dimensions for practicing Buddhists. Hindu festivals like Diwali have become civic celebrations in cities like Leicester, England, drawing participants from across religious and ethnic communities. But this transformation hasn't been without challenges or resistance. The rise of right-wing populist movements across Europe and North America has been fueled partly by anxiety about these religious and demographic changes. Political parties from the Alternative for Germany to France's National Rally have built their platforms partly around concerns about Islamic immigration and its impact on European Christian identity. These concerns reflect genuine questions about how societies absorb large-scale religious and cultural change. Integration challenges are real, from questions about Islamic law and secular legal systems to debates about religious symbols in public spaces. The 2004 French ban on religious symbols in schools, largely targeting Islamic headscarves, reflected deeper anxieties about how Islamic practices fit within French secularism. Yet research suggests that most of these fears are overblown. Studies of Muslim communities across Europe show that support for democratic values and institutions is actually quite high, often higher than among some native-born populations. The vast majority of Muslim migrants and their children embrace both their religious identities and their new national ones. The Canadian model offers perhaps the most successful example of managing religious diversity through immigration. Canada's explicit multiculturalism policy, enshrined in law since 1988, has created space for religious communities to maintain their distinct identities while participating fully in Canadian society. The result has been remarkably low levels of religious conflict, despite high levels of religious diversity. Consider the town of Mississauga, Ontario, just outside Toronto. Once a predominantly white Christian suburb, it's now one of the most religiously diverse places on Earth. Hindu temples, Sikh gurdwaras, Islamic centers, Buddhist monasteries, and Christian churches of dozens of denominations serve a population that includes significant numbers from virtually every world religion. Yet social cohesion remains high, and interfaith cooperation is the norm rather than the exception. This success isn't accidental. It reflects deliberate policy choices about how to manage diversity, from education systems that teach about multiple religious traditions, to employment laws that accommodate religious practices, to urban planning that ensures all communities have access to appropriate worship spaces. The economic implications of religious diversity through immigration are also worth considering. Religious communities often serve as crucial social capital networks, helping new immigrants find employment, housing, and social connections. Mosque communities frequently organize job fairs, while Sikh gurdwaras provide temporary housing for newcomers. Hindu temples often become centers for professional networking among Indian Americans working in technology and medicine. These religious networks contribute to what economists call ethnic economies, business networks organized partly around shared religious and cultural identities. The success of Indian Americans in Silicon Valley, Lebanese Americans in retail, or Pakistani Americans in hospitality often reflects the social capital provided by religious community connections. The global nature of modern religious communities also creates interesting transnational connections. A mosque in London might maintain sister relationships with mosques in Pakistan, Morocco, and Turkey, creating networks that span continents. Hindu temples in the United States often coordinate with temples in India for major festivals and ceremonies, while Buddhist communities maintain connections with monasteries across Asia. These transnational religious networks are creating new forms of global citizenship that transcend national boundaries while remaining grounded in local communities. A young Muslim woman in Berlin might participate simultaneously in local German civic life, European Muslim identity networks, and global Islamic intellectual conversations. The educational implications are equally profound. Schools across the Western world are grappling with how to accommodate religious diversity while maintaining secular educational standards. This has led to innovations ranging from multi-faith prayer rooms to curriculum changes that include non-Christian religious perspectives in history and literature classes. University campuses have become laboratories for religious pluralism, with students from dozens of religious backgrounds learning to navigate shared secular academic environments while maintaining distinct religious identities. The University of Toronto's Multi-Faith Center, for instance, provides worship and meditation spaces for over a dozen different religious traditions, while also serving as a hub for interfaith dialogue and cooperation. The technological dimension of this religious transformation is particularly fascinating. Social media and digital platforms have allowed religious communities to maintain connections across vast distances while also facilitating new forms of religious practice and learning. Online Islamic education platforms connect Muslim students in Western countries with scholars in traditional centers of Islamic learning. Hindu devotional apps bring ancient Sanskrit texts to smartphones in suburban American communities. These digital religious networks are creating what scholars call glocalized religious practices, traditions that are simultaneously global in their connections and local in their applications. A Buddhist meditation session in London might be guided by a teacher in Tibet via video conference, while incorporating elements adapted specifically for British practitioners. The question of religious architecture deserves special attention. As immigrant religious communities establish themselves in Western countries, they're creating new forms of sacred architecture that blend traditional religious requirements with local building codes, climate conditions, and aesthetic preferences. The result is architectures that are genuinely hybrid, recognizably Islamic, Hindu, Buddhist, or Sikh, while also being unmistakably American, Canadian, British, or German. These buildings represent physical manifestations of religious adaptation and integration, creating new traditions that will influence religious architecture for generations to come. The generational dynamics within immigrant religious communities reveal fascinating patterns of continuity and change. While first-generation immigrants often maintain very traditional religious practices, their children and grandchildren tend to develop more selective, personally meaningful relationships with their inherited traditions. This doesn't necessarily mean secularization. Instead, it often means religious innovation. Second-generation Muslim Americans might maintain strong Islamic identities while developing distinctly American approaches to Islamic practice. Third-generation Hindu Americans might blend ancient Indian spiritual practices with contemporary American spiritual movements like mindfulness meditation. These generational changes are creating new forms of religious syncretism, not the abandonment of traditional religions, but their creative adaptation to new contexts. The result is religious traditions that are both continuous with their origins and genuinely new in their contemporary expressions. The gender dimensions of religious transformation through immigration are particularly important. Many immigrant religious communities must navigate between traditional gender roles and the gender equality norms of their new societies. This has led to fascinating innovations in religious practice and community leadership. Muslim women's groups across the Western world have developed new forms of Islamic feminism that maintain Islamic identity while advocating for gender equality within Islamic frameworks. Hindu women's organizations have created new leadership roles within traditional temple structures. Sikh women have become prominent in community leadership in ways that might not have been possible in traditional Punjab contexts. The interfaith dimension of religious diversification through immigration deserves particular attention. As Western societies become more religiously diverse, interfaith dialogue and cooperation have become necessities rather than luxuries. This has led to unprecedented levels of interfaith engagement and mutual learning. In many Western cities, interfaith councils have become important civic institutions, mediating between religious communities and secular authorities, while also facilitating cooperation on social issues. During the COVID-19 pandemic, interfaith networks across the Western world coordinated religious community responses to public health measures, demonstrating how religious diversity can enhance rather than undermine social resilience. The culinary dimension of religious transformation through immigration might seem trivial, but it reflects deeper patterns of cultural integration and adaptation. Islamic halal food production has become a major industry across the Western world, while Hindu vegetarian traditions have influenced mainstream food culture in ways that go far beyond immigrant communities. Religious dietary laws have also driven innovation in food technology and production, from halal-certified processed foods to kosher supervision of industrial food production. These seemingly mundane adaptations reflect the deep integration of immigrant religious communities into the economic and social fabric of Western societies. The calendar and time dimensions of religious diversity present interesting challenges and opportunities. As Western societies accommodate multiple religious communities, they must navigate between different religious holidays, Sabbath observances, and seasonal celebrations. Many employers now accommodate Islamic Friday prayers, Jewish Sabbath observance, and Hindu festival celebrations alongside traditional Christian holidays. Schools adjust testing schedules around Ramadan fasting and Hindu holy days. These accommodations reflect growing recognition that religious diversity requires institutional flexibility and creativity. The artistic and cultural implications of religious diversification through immigration are profound. Islamic calligraphy, Hindu classical music, Buddhist meditation practices, and Sikh devotional singing are all becoming part of Western cultural landscapes in ways that would have been unimaginable even 50 years ago. These aren't just preserved traditions, they're living, evolving cultural forms that are being adapted and innovated within Western contexts. Hip-hop artists incorporate Islamic themes, classical musicians blend Hindu ragas with Western orchestral traditions, and contemporary artists draw on Buddhist aesthetics for gallery installations. The youth dimension of this transformation is particularly important. Young people growing up in religiously diverse Western societies often develop more cosmopolitan, inclusive attitudes toward religious difference than previous generations. They're more likely to have friends from different religious backgrounds, to attend interfaith events, and to see religious diversity as normal rather than exceptional. This generational shift suggests that the religious remapping of the West isn't just a temporary phenomenon driven by current immigration patterns. Instead, it's creating permanent changes in how Western societies understand and practice religious life. The political implications of religious diversification through immigration extend far beyond immigration policy itself. Religious communities are becoming important political constituencies, advocating for policies that reflect their values and interests while also participating in broader democratic debates. Muslim political organizations advocate for civil rights protections and foreign policies that reflect concern for Muslim majority countries. Hindu American groups lobby for closer U.S. India relations while also advocating for religious freedom protections. Sikh organizations work on hate crime legislation while maintaining engagement with Punjabi political issues. These political engagements reflect the complex, multi-layered identities of immigrant religious communities, simultaneously committed to their new countries while maintaining connections to their religious and ethnic origins. The security dimensions of religious diversification have unfortunately become prominent in post-9/11 Western societies. Concerns about Islamic radicalization have led to increased surveillance and monitoring of Muslim communities, while hate crimes against religious minorities have increased across many Western countries. Yet, research consistently shows that religious communities are generally net contributors to social stability rather than threats to it. Religious institutions provide social services, community support, and civic engagement opportunities that strengthen rather than undermine democratic societies. The legal dimensions of accommodating religious diversity present ongoing challenges across Western legal systems. Questions about religious law and secular legal authority, religious symbols in public spaces, and religious exemptions from general laws require constant negotiation and rebalancing. Most Western legal systems have developed pragmatic approaches that accommodate religious diversity while maintaining secular legal authority. These compromises aren't always satisfactory to all parties, but they generally work to maintain social peace while respecting both religious freedom and secular governance. Looking toward the future, the religious remapping of the West through immigration seems likely to continue and accelerate. Current demographic trends suggest that religious diversity will increase rather than decrease in coming decades, as immigrant religious communities grow through both continued immigration and higher fertility rates compared to native-born populations. This doesn't mean Western societies will become majority non-Christian anytime soon. Christianity will likely remain the largest religious tradition in most Western countries for many decades to come. But it does mean that Christianity will increasingly exist within genuinely pluralistic religious landscapes, rather than as the unchallenged dominant tradition. The implications of this transformation extend far beyond religion itself. They touch on fundamental questions about national identity, cultural continuity, social integration, and democratic governance in diverse societies. How Western societies navigate these challenges will influence not just their own futures, but global patterns of migration, integration, and religious coexistence. What's clear is that immigration isn't just changing the ethnic or linguistic composition of Western societies, it's changing their spiritual and cultural DNA. The Gothic cathedrals of Europe now share skylines with minarets and temple spires. The church bells that have marked Christian time for centuries now mingle with calls to prayer, and temple gongs marking different rhythms of sacred time. This isn't a story of replacement or decline. It's a story of expansion and adaptation, of ancient religious traditions finding new expressions in new lands, while those lands themselves are enriched and complicated by exposure to the full diversity of human spiritual experience. The religious map of the West is being rewritten, not through conquest or conversion, but through the simple human act of families seeking better lives carrying their deepest beliefs with them across oceans and borders. Their gods are becoming our neighbors' gods. Their festivals are becoming our children's celebrations. Their prayers are becoming part of the soundtrack of Western cities.